play will go under review.
Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening, and thank you so much for being here and tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter/X at @show_DeRosa. Tonight's tagline is Jos Ferratu, a bit of a multi-layered one. Besides the movie coming out, we are also entering October, the spooky month, and we unfortunately had a spooky situation on Sunday evening as the Buffalo Bills essentially get their butts whooped by the Baltimore Ravens to cap off a September that was riddled with optimism, filled with good moments, but unfortunately ends on a sour note. But tonight's episode will be focusing in depth on their September. What did we think of this team? What did we learn about them offensively, defensively, on special teams if we have time? And really, what can we make of a team going into what would be debatably their most difficult stretch of the season to date, with matchups against Houston, the Jets, and eventually Tennessee, the Seahawks? A lot of tough teams on their slate. But I can't do this episode alone. I can never do it alone. So joining me tonight is Cover One's very own Chris Seth at Low Buffa to go over this September for the Buffalo Bills. And I will bring him in now. Chris, Green Day was indeed right. September has ended, and you are here to join me to talk about it. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. For 3 weeks, I was really excited to think about September. And then it's like in 1 week, all good feelings gone. And I just want to get that taste out of our mouths. Let's destroy the Texans. Let's shut down Stephon Diggs, even though I don't really hold any ill will against him. He was great for us. It was awesome. But, he left a sour taste in our mouths. But I am ready to go. Let's look at September, the good parts. And I suppose we'll have to talk a little bit about last week. But thanks for having me on. Let's go.
Happy to have you here, man. And yes, unfortunately, we will have to talk about it. I was really hoping that the thumbnail with the joyous Josh and Keon would have continued and the good vibes would have continued, but it is relevant information as that was a pretty significant loss. But let's just get started and we'll talk about the Buffalo Bills offense in September. Before I do that, actually, real fast, everybody, again, thank you so much for joining. If you could be as kind enough as to drop a like on this video, if you enjoy our show, if you enjoy the conversation, if you're excited for the conversation, that would be greatly appreciated. And we welcome all of you again. Roy Collins says, we need our injured players back ASAP. I would agree with that, Roy. Look at us agreeing on something. We will definitely have several disagreements during this episode. That's every episode, but we love you, Roy. Thank you for being here. The Buffalo Bills offense, starting out a season with a lot of uncertainty, a new look wide receiver room, a new look philosophy with an OC that while he took over in the second half of last year, does in fact bring his own playbook for the first time to this team. And for 3 games, we would have probably agreed, Chris, that it was an overwhelming success. You talk about the bounce back performance against Arizona, where they start out slow, but ultimately put together 4 straight scoring drives, get ahead significantly, put up over 30 points. The rest is history. They start 1-0. Then you get to next week against Miami on Thursday Night Football, and they trounce the Miami Dolphins, run the ball at will, and completely own that game in the trenches in time of possession. Then you talk about week 3, an absolute drubbing of the Jacksonville Jaguars, exploiting an injured man-heavy scheme with Josh Allen throwing the ball at will to all spots easily. And then, of course, the Baltimore game where things tend to slow down. It's a lot more of a struggle. And we learn that for every high, there is a low, and this Bills offense is mortal. So, Chris, I will give the floor to you and just ask you for your general thoughts on this Buffalo Bills offense in September.
For the first 3 weeks, they had 2 bad quarters. Those first 2 quarters against Arizona, and then they looked like a juggernaut. They looked unstoppable. Like every bit as good as they did in the perfect New England playoff game. And then everything is riding so high. Like, okay, we're going to be able to, surf through the injuries on defense. And Joe Brady was, getting measured for a statue. And then we go to Baltimore. And I was just like, leading into the game, I honestly thought they were going to be okay because, I knew I knew that the injuries they have on defense aligned almost 1-to-1 with what Baltimore wants to do.
Right.
And but I thought, okay, we've seen really good Baltimore teams play the Bills before, and Sean McDermott, the defensive staff, Shaq Lawson, like unsung guys have been schemed into position to prepare for the scheme, but that was kind of Greg Roman, and it was also minus Derrick Henry, and they exploited, every possible mismatch to the nth degree, to the greatest possible advantage. And, we'll probably talk some about it when we get to defense, but it really, that game shouldn't negate all the good that happened on offense. Like every good thing we saw against the Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Cardinals, all of that was real. And just because of a buzzsaw in Baltimore, we shouldn't lose track of how good that offense was. Like even after the nightmare fuel that was that Baltimore game, they're still number one in EPA per play. They're number one in success rate. They're number one in EPA per pass. Like the only thing they're not in the top 10 in is EPA per rush, where they're 11th, God forbid. So like, don't let, one of the things we do need to remember, like the Baltimore game was bad. It was bad. There's no sugarcoating it, but it doesn't mean they're all of a sudden a bad team. It means they ran into a really bad matchup.
Yeah. That is a philosophy that, as I've grown watching this game and as I've learned more and more about it from a schematic standpoint, I feel like, Anthony, whenever I say that phrase, I don't even mean to do it. It's just like the word standpoint. I'm going on a side rant. The word standpoint was never in my vocabulary or vernacular until I started watching Disguise coverage. Shout out to you, Ant. We'll see you at 9:00. Anyways,
we need to start saying everything in threes just to honor him.
But when you talk about that game, and like when you talk about just watching the Bills, like matchups are just, it becomes glaringly obvious that throughout the course of a season, you just learn more and more about what this team can and can't face in certain situations, what the team is looking like, whether they're, structured soundly to be able to take on a team like the Baltimore Ravens. And everybody going into this matchup, the biggest concern was, how do they attack the Bills defense, specifically the middle of the field, specifically linebackers, the second level. And then you see that. And then when you talk about it vice versa, you talk about Josh Allen and this offense and how they've been able to kind of win against zone, win against man, be able to run on teams, be able to really get the ball moving, even if they don't have the true dynamic alpha. And I said that last week. And looking at that matchup against Baltimore, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I think they can move the ball on them. It'll probably be more of a struggle, but they'll have their licks. And then all of a sudden they basically get stymied for, I want to say, about pretty much up until the end of the second quarter, where they started moving the ball a bit more. And you start to have questions about this offense. You start to wonder, like, is it truly just like playing above its depth, or do we feel that maybe it just ran into a brick wall? And I would say more of the latter than the previous, because if you go back and watch this Bills game, just the offense, every Josh Allen snap, every run, it's not like they couldn't move the ball. It's not like they didn't have their moments where maybe receivers were getting open deeper down the field or over the middle, but rather just like it was a perfect storm of different negative situations, whether you want to talk about maybe Josh had a clean pocket, but it was well covered. Maybe Josh didn't see the open man and all of a sudden he gets flustered out because the pass protection doesn't hold up. Maybe someone drops a pass. And those things, when I watch that game, obviously are negatives. And again, we want to reiterate, the Baltimore game was bad. None of us are sugarcoating it. But I didn't think that offense completely lost itself or its identity or what could make it good, as much as they just ran into a team that was juiced up and covered them well. And now you have to course correct. And I just want to reinforce that just because they had a bad game, it doesn't mean that you invalidate all the things they did for the first 3 weeks of the season. Like you said, Chris, they started out hot. They got really, really in a great groove when you talk about how they fared against Miami and how James Cook was being used and all the wonderful things they were doing with him pre to post snap. And then really like against Jacksonville, where they were moving the ball at will. So it was a good month. It ended on a sour note, but I still would say it's a good month. And I just bring up the matchup point because, like, you could really be flying high as an offense, but there's always going to be a team that's structured schematically that just is built somehow, not maybe intentionally, but maybe just by the chance to be able to beat you. And that's what Baltimore was. And you course correct. If you see him again later in the year, you can run something differently. I firmly stand on the belief that the Buffalo Bills were about to make that a 1-score game before the trick play from hell got called. And that's a great segue into our first topic of offense, Chris, which is our Joe Brady review for the month of September. So getting more specific into him, how he was calling, how his game flow looked, and all of these factors into being an OC. What'd you think? What is your overall, I guess, review of Joe Brady in the month of September?
Yeah, I think he's been excellent. Like you can't say the Bills have the same amount of talent at wide receiver as they did before. You don't lose Diggs and maintain the same level of talent, but we have probably a group with a higher floor than we've had before, and he's utilizing that group really well. And one of the primary ways you can see a dramatic change from Joe Brady from years prior is in yards after catch. Like we have clamored, for yards after catch as Bills fans for years. And some of that before has largely been scheme. Some of that has been Allen too. And he's been in upfront about that at times. But like this year, the Bills have gone from a yards after catch EPA per attempt. They're first in the league right now. They're getting 0.42 EPA in yards after catch for each pass attempt. Like that's an insanely big number in terms of EPA. And they rank first in the league at that, where in 2023, they were 22nd. In 22, they were 18th. In 2021, they were 28th. Like the last time they were decent at this was in 2020. That first kind of big breakout year for Allen. They ranked 6th that year, but like the last 3 years, they haven't been anywhere close to that. And that is a large degree to Allen, but it's also a really big degree to what Joe Brady and the schematic changes and the floor raised in talent for wide receivers and the way they are getting guys schemed open, which is something we have begged for Josh. That is largely due to what Joe Brady has brought to this offense. And, that is one of those easy buttons that we have begged for.
Yeah. I've been really, really pleased with the way that there's been an emphasis on yards after catch, something that, again, as you alluded to in years past, the Bills hadn't been as successful in, except for 2020. And something that when you talk about your concerns with Josh Allen last season and maybe the willingness of him to press a bit too much, that can offset, because if you were talking about easy button options or things that he can find that Joe Brady's able to scheme open based on coverage, and it's something where you combo that with Josh Allen maybe refining things and being able to lead people a bit better, you get this yak offense that now creates so much more efficiency for him. And I have Josh Allen's just overall rankings for the season and where he's at, but where I really thought it was striking is, he's currently 25th in total attempts and 26th in dropbacks, 20th in passing yards, but he still stands at 3rd in passing touchdowns. He hasn't thrown an interception yet. He's 2nd in passer rating. He's 7th in yards per attempt, 10th in completion percentage, 9th in completion percentage above expected, and 2nd in overall EPA and EPA per dropback. He is still having a phenomenal, efficient year, despite the fact that there aren't nearly as many passing attempts. And I think one of the factors that is leading to this positivity in his play, apart from, again, him just working on his mechanics and his throwing ability as I've wanted, and I know Eric has talked about this a ton of times, but also the fact that they're scheming things up for Josh to be able to hit receivers that are getting more yards after their catch, after contact, and it's working. And it's a beautiful thing mixed with a rushing attack that's also been able to be productive and be effective. And I just have to tip my cap to Joe Brady, because I kind of figured, just given, again, what we saw him do in the second half of last year and what we've all projected it to be, that this was going to be the identity offense, right? Like, as Anthony had pointed out with the condensed formations, and as we've all said with the type of receivers and the skill sets that they brought in, this is an offense that wants to be efficient, that wants to get the ball in your hands and still create explosive plays, even if they're not downfield. So far in September, even with the Ravens game, I think they've done that, and they've done it well. What I am interested to see going forward is when they play Houston, when they play the Jets, Tennessee, Seattle, do they face defenses that are now starting to catch on to the way that Joe Brady is calling a game, the flow of the game, and how does Joe Brady respond to that? I think that's really just my biggest question for him now, because for so many years, we've had the luxury of seeing a Bills team start out the season, start out their September really hot, even last season. You look at the Ken Dorsey year and how it turned out and what it started like, and it was a much different conversation, even in 2022 at points. I just want to be proven by Joe Brady that in a game like the Baltimore game, that doesn't make you totally unravel, that
exactly, yeah.
The writing isn't on the wall, that you aren't going to panic, that you aren't going to abandon things that work too early. Because I felt like in that Baltimore game, and he even said this directly, but before that, when I watched the game, before I even ever got around to watching it on film and before I ever looked at the stats, I felt like they were actually able to move the ball on the ground pretty efficiently, pretty effectively with James Cook, and he got away from it. And I don't really understand why, in the sense that you could have introduced it more and ran more things off of it. It felt like there wasn't, in my eyes, enough play action. There wasn't enough an emphasis on Cook to continue going and making those down and distances easier, where you didn't have to hold the ball for too long and cave into the Ravens front. I felt like there was a little bit of like this overzealous nature in Joe Brady to just go back to the past purely because they felt like they needed to, maybe because they felt like they were down by too much, even though there was time. I wasn't a fan of that, and that's something that I can criticize him for, as well as the trick play. But overall, I'm pleased with Joe Brady. I thought he had a great month. I just need to see that he can bounce back from a game like this. This, to me, is the biggest test, because if they go into Houston and they dominate, or at the very least put on a great performance, I'm definitely going to be a lot more relieved, win or loss. If they go into Houston and they lay an egg, I'm going to start having concerns. And this is kind of my philosophy, Chris, is just I need trends to build before I can make a definitive statement on Joe Brady. I think calling for his job was, emotional overreaction on Twitter, but saying, hey, I need to see you improve is not a bad thing. I would like to see him bounce back from this game. I hope he does. We'll just have to see. And any final thoughts on Joe Brady before we carry over to Josh Allen?
Yeah, like I completely agree. Like, you don't stop throwing your best pitch because you gave a home run. You gave up a home run on it. If that fastball is your best pitch and you give up a home run, like, you still come back to that fastball. You don't just all of a sudden become a changeup pitcher or lose faith in your fastball because of one home run. Like, Baltimore was, no one escapes blame for that game, but like Brady said, like, the game plan was good, but like it might have been called wrong. Like there were several mistakes in terms of play calls. Like the trick play stands out like a sore thumb in that regard. Absolutely. But we have seen this be one of the most efficient offenses in the league through the first month, even with that bad game factored in. So yeah, show me that fastball is still there. Show me that you still believe in that fastball, and that we're not changing course just because of, one bad result.
Absolutely. You can't overreact. You can't panic. 100%. I totally agree with that. And
learn, but don't panic. Yep. Yeah.
It's just, it's like panic is so prevalent. And some of the things you read after a loss for a team that was 3-0. I mean, come on, guys. Like, it's a bad game, but let's not pretend that also, like, there wasn't an opportunity for them to come back. And I'm not saying don't criticize Brady. More so, like, again, I've just been preaching this point. Like, right before that trick play happened, you had the Allen back shoulder to Coleman, which, by the way, loved that after the drop that he had earlier in the game, to see him bounce back and to see that rapport building itself is really nice. It's something I'm definitely encouraged by and hope that they go into October. But you had that back shoulder throw. You had a Cook run of 6 yards, a Cook run of 4 yards. Then on 1st and 10, they run Cook for 3 yards. So there's this is kind of where I'm getting at too, where it's like, I was seeing the trends and the things that were working for the Buffalo Bills this entire year in this game. It was just execution problems and things that kind of tripped them up. Again, bad pass protection, poor decision-making when it came to the trick play, even some faults from Josh Allen, like Josh Allen taking the sack later on in the game that took him out of field goal range, or talking about the, what was the other play? There was another one that I was going to reference, but I'm blanking on it, but it was basically a missed throw and just a bad decision. Like, it was a mixture of bad and good in that game. That's going to happen at some point in the year, but I didn't see things that would make me think, oh my God, this offense is lost. It's clueless. Joe Brady has no idea what he's doing. Like, none of that. It was just a good matchup for the Baltimore Ravens, and they got the best of them. So
the defense handed them a terrible game script, like from the first play from scrimmage, like they got punched in the mouth, and like Baltimore had an excellent plan, and like game script wise, like they eliminated a lot of the balance that the Bills would have normally had. They eliminated a lot of what they thought they could rely on in terms of short or intermediate stuff. And yeah, it was a team loss, get up and go fight again.
Exactly. And I also saw a really interesting tweet today about, I think it was Cole Jackson. I can't remember which Ravens rep actually spoke about this, but talking about how the Ravens basically stayed in nickel, but they just kept moving Kyle Hamilton around. Like, got to remember too, like going into that game, the Ravens were 1-2, but I had kept saying like that pass metric that they had where they were like bottom of the league, that's not going to hold up. It's just not. Right, There's way too much talent in the secondary. Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins. You talk about what's the safety? Marcus Williams, I believe. And then Kyle Hamilton, and then Hamilton. Trenton Simpson, Adafe Owe, like Matabuke. Like that is an absolutely ridiculous defense. And it's hard to move the ball on them. So I think it was also like expectations going into a matchup of like, oh, this team hasn't found its stride. This team's struggling right now. We'll take advantage of them. And then they woke up. So again, fault to Brady for certain situations, fault to Josh for certain situations. But if we're talking Joe Brady in the month of September, I'm still very pleased. That game's going to be a blemish. But so if I gave him a letter grade, I'd give him like a B+, and it would have been like an A- had they won that game. But let's move on to Josh Allen, and we'll wrap up our thoughts on offense, because again, I mentioned his metrics before. Allen, I think, has been playing some of the most sound ball of his career. I think he's looked fantastic in all levels. He's looked commanding. I think, even in the situations where he's had to press, he's had some success, including the 54-yard wrist flick at the boundary to Khalil Shakir, which ridiculous, man. Just absolutely insane shit from him. So, Chris, let me hear your thoughts on Josh Allen and any final thoughts you want to give on this offense.
Yeah, so I don't have any particular metrics for Josh, because they're by and large really good, but he's been outstanding for a long time. Like the thoughts I have on Josh right now are a lot from Eric pointing out the way his mechanics have been fine-tuned again, akin to what we saw from his work with Palmer, and just the spot on mechanics that lead to the pinpoint passes, like not just being accurate, but being, I'm going to place the ball right where you need it. Like the pass to Coleman, that he unfortunately dropped. Like you could not throw that ball better. You couldn't. Perfect. Like, from a yard away, you couldn't throw that better to right where it needed to be. And you can see his rotation, where his front foot is in terms of alignment. Like everything right now is as finely tuned with him again as we've ever seen it. And that's leading to some, just some crazy efficiency. And I also think that's part of the part of how he's calm in the pocket again. Like even when he's, playing well, he can be a little helter-skelter. Like that's part of Josh. But I think we're seeing this year an increased level of calm, even as everything else breaks down around him. And forget the Baltimore game. That's still one of the strongest positive signs from this season for me.
I completely agree. I don't even think I could refute anything of that, because like, and even in a big loss, I'm watching this game and I'm seeing Allen throw, and I'm like, man, that's on the spot. Like that's a perfect toss. Yep. Like the throw to Coleman was beautiful. And I'm so sad he dropped it, because that legitimately would have been like, it might have even been my favorite throw of the season had he caught that ball. Like it probably would have been my favorite, because it would have just been such a statement to just see that connection starting to form in the end of the first half, like the implications of what that throw would have meant, the placement from Josh, like putting it in the right spot, just didn't ultimately get executed. But again, looking at that game and looking back in September, just so many memorable, great Josh Allen throws. And I think he's really locked in. I think he took the offseason quite seriously. You brought up his work with Palmer, and that's just such a big thing for me, because like I had said so many times, the thing with me wasn't that I thought Allen was just going to like suck or be terrible, but like there was just sloppiness. There was like kind of a slight regression in how tight his mechanics were. And you could see that affect things like downfield accuracy and maybe middle of the field accuracy, placement when you need to lead a receiver. The differences, even if they're minor, are still to me a massive boost if you talk about the season as a whole. And you're seeing that in certain plays. I can think of some throws even in the Ravens game, like the one dart he had to Kincaid that Eric talked about in our Discord channel. I could think back to the Arizona game, the first touchdown throw to Matt Collins, which is a perfect ball. I could think about the 50-50 to Coleman, but still put it high enough where Coleman could get it. And then, of course, those back shoulder throws, like numerous examples of Allen just being on point, but knowing when to put touch on the ball and knowing when he has to fire it, recognizing that. And then you brought up an excellent point, playing calm. Because even in that game against Baltimore, like he's getting flushed out of the pocket because he freaking has to. You know, the pass pro breaks down in the interior. They don't pick up the blitz correctly. Again, something you probably could partially attribute to Josh. Maybe they didn't recognize it. Maybe he didn't accordingly assign his blockers. But even then, like in a game like that, he's getting up, he's going back into the huddle, he's still trying to get it down the field. He faced a really good defense that took it away, but I never walked away from that game thinking Allen was sloppy. Allen was the full reason that they lost that game and it was a complete choke job. I thought it was just a mix of bag of things, with some of it being on him and some of it being on other parts of the offense, Joe Brady's play calling and all that. And then I just think about the whole month and I think about going forward and the concerns I have and how they can kind of be quelled if you just have this Josh Allen for a full year. If you have Josh Allen playing this kind of ball going into October, going into November, going into the cold months, to me, it's yes, there's probably going to be questions. There's probably going to be lows with this offense to continue, highs, lows, things a mixed bag just based on some of the opponents they have to face and the difficulty in defenses. But that type of play from Josh Allen can literally beat anybody on any given day. It's the type of locked in quarterback play that I hope he can continue. Again, we're only through a month of the year. He has to keep it up for the rest of the way, but he's given us every indication that he can. And it's all about everything with Joe Brady, his receivers, him coming together and being able to keep the momentum going. So that's all I got on Josh. Anything else you want to add, Chris, before we pivot over to defense? And there's a lot of conversation about a specific defensive end. We did not forget. We were going to get there. Don't worry.
We did not forget. We could
not forget.
We have an alien unicorn wrapped in rhino skin at quarterback, and I love him. And, watching him play is a joy we should just all appreciate every month of the football season.
I agree. I'm still like kind of realizing football's back. Like it's such a nice feeling to just be talking about in-season games and meaningful football and having it. I've missed it so much. It was losing my mind. But
and it's already week 5, Joe. Come on.
Oh. I hate it. So Stop going so fast. Add 10 more weeks to the season. Let's get really weird. Let's end this right as we hit the warm months. How about that? But
yeah,
we're gonna get to defense. I do want to plug one thing here. And this is the one pass. And I haven't been playing the role because it still says Slack. So I want to get the updated one eventually, but I'm going to plug the one pass before we get over to defense. Friends, people who have joined the show for the very first time, people who come here every week, the one pass in the description below, you can find the link to sign up for it and become an insider today. And I cannot stress enough that one pass is the lifeblood of this network. If you subscribe to us, you are helping us have access to all of the resources that we can use to pull up the data, to pull up the film, and to be able to provide the content as in depth as it can be for every person who follows Cover One, whether it's on our shows, our video content, or in our written articles. I heavily suggest you sign up if you are interested at all, because there are some awesome things happening. We have a partnership with 26 Shirts going right now, which is super cool. If you are in the Western New York area, I'm sure you know about Dell, and I'm sure you know about that company, as well as our partnership with TSC Buffalo. And we've been giving away some tickets to events, to autograph signings, and we had great responses from those. And then, of course, you just get access to some awesome insight in that Discord where we have numerous channels, constant discussion, direct access to the creators of this network, and you can learn a lot and also just have a lot of fun doing it. So if you are interested, $60, link in the description below. Check it out. And again, guys, thank you so much for being here. Drop a like if you haven't already. Even the Ravens fan who joined us, who wants to glow. And I'll say this, I wasn't talking shit about Derrick Henry, and I said it was going to be a tough matchup. I just thought the Bills could pull it out. They didn't. Congratulations to you. Your team is good. I got nothing but good things to say about them. I got nothing else. Let's move on to defense. And Chris, it was pretty optimistic. It was a lot of fun. Outside of 2 quarters in an Arizona game, and then of course Sunday. So I am very excited to hear your take on the September Buffalo Bills defense and all of the miserable things that happened to it in just a few weeks.
Yeah, like again, can't let one game destroy all the good that had happened. Like it is really hard to evaluate Bobby Babich. I can say it. I know I can do it. It's really hard to evaluate Bobby Babich after all the injuries that they've had, especially down the spine of the defense. Like it's hard to say really what he's done well or what they've struggled at, because so much of it has been duct tape and scotch tape and bubble gum and any other kind of adhesive to hold things together when they're out for Milano for probably the entire regular season, maybe not the whole playoffs, and losing Bernard. Like, nope, I came close, Spin. I came close, but didn't do it. But he is. We're just going to say he is, but I didn't say it.
Spin, you are chaotic neutral in this chat. I appreciate when you watch the show. I giggle off screen not off screen, I'm on screen, but he'll leave one-liner every now and then that just breaks me and I lose my entire train of thought. But don't stop doing it. It's very entertaining and this is great. Sorry, Chris, please continue.
No. But it's hard to evaluate Bobby, the defensive coordinator. So with all the injuries, hopefully we'll get Bernard back soon. Mm-hmm. Johnson is maybe still a couple of weeks away, but you don't just replace those guys. And there are ways that they have shown us that they can scheme around that to hide some of that talent loss as best they can. But Baltimore showed us that there are just going to be times when it's going to be shoved down your throat that you are missing significant talent that you just need. And Baltimore showed us that, Dorian Williams was put in a blender repeatedly. The same thing happened to Balin Spector, and there were enough combinations of bad angles taken by Rapp and Hamlin that, it's hard to isolate, all the runs, all the extra yards they gave up with some of the angles they were taking. And in that, it makes it really difficult to evaluate, okay, how are they getting coached up? Because guys like Cam Lewis and Jamarcus Ingram have been really big pluses, solid play from both of those guys and splash plays at sometimes too, and that's a higher level of play than I thought we were going to get out of either of those guys. And so that's part of the coaching. And then also, Dorian Williams probably isn't ready yet, but we've got to continue to get him coached up, do the best they can, because they're going to be without Milano. So let's get Bernard back. Let's get Teron healthy. And, we can evaluate him as the DC once we, have a month with all the available talent. To try to hold the injuries against him, it's unfair. Their play to a degree and the way they're coached up rests on him. But, the Ravens showed us that there's a talent deficit there.
I firmly agree. And before that game, my review of Babich would have been overwhelmingly positive, like A+, because it wasn't just a matter of the defense playing well. It was the defense playing beyond its means, losing your all-pro nickel corner, losing your all-pro outside linebacker, losing your Mike, your green dot. Like talking about inexperience, or not really inexperience, but like a new safety room and corners that you were kind of wondering what would they do. Like I had, hopes for the starters, but even more so after the first week, I was like, man, this cornerback room's playing insane. I think Benford is legitimately a top 10 corner at this point, and I mean that. But, it's a weird thing because you want to evaluate Bobby Babich for the good, but like obviously with injury, it's kind of like you're climbing out of a hole and hoping for the best and just hoping that they can hold over. And when they play such good sound defense 2 weeks in a row against two teams that, want to air the ball out on you, want to be explosive, and you shut them down essentially, you feel pretty good about it. But, you got to also keep in the back of your mind that you are not playing with a majority of your starters in the second level, but rather guys that are fill-in, second-year players, developmental guys. And I have such a hard time going back and forth on it because injuries to me are like not an excuse, but also I think there is enough that can happen to a team to drastically alter how that team can defend. And like you said, this Ravens game exposed it, because I will put some blame on Bobby Babich. I felt like he carried in a similar, I guess, like game plan in the first half of that game to what he was carrying in the past few weeks because it worked. However, I think the Ravens also kind of saw the injuries and just wanted to take advantage of it, make you guess. Again, one of the things I talked about over and over again was the Lamar PO, the Ravens being able to just make you guess, am I handing it off to Henry? Am I keeping? Am I going to take advantage of the fact that you're hesitating and have a gap open up in front of me, or be able to throw it for a screen? And then, of course, talking about what Eric talked about too, the fact that the Ravens baited the Bills into doing what they do, which is getting their D-line upfield, and then, of course, taking advantage of all the space they had. Yep. That game to me felt like the first real, I guess, showing of like defensive coordinator inexperience for Bobby Babich. Not a slight at the fact that he hasn't been there, that he hasn't been with the team, that he hasn't been developing guys, because I'm a huge fan. I was ecstatic when they hired him as a DC. I still think he's going to be a phenomenal defensive coordinator, but I think the injuries are absolutely not anything to blame on him. Obviously, he's doing the best he can with what he's got, but also I do think that blame can go to him for how he defended in the first half of that game and taking a long time to figure it out. But also, again, how am I bringing up the stupid freaking trick play when we're talking about defense, Chris, is because it changed everything. And people are going to forget that the first two drives of the second half of that game were stops, 3 and outs on the Ravens offense. They were figuring them out. Then, of course, they give him a short field and everything went to shit. I'm sorry. I haven't gotten to like properly yell or vent about this to anyone. And I'm glad I saved it for now. He was adjusting.
Yeah.
Oh my God. He was adjusting.
And so like, right, and that trick play and the fumble, like, were as big an impact on the game as the 87-yard Henry touchdown run. Like, that was as dramatic a shift in momentum for that game. And they both went to the Ravens. And, if the Bills continue moving right there, then, we're looking at a 1-score game. And, Greg talked about this, from the Ravens psyche, from, giving up as many fourth quarter, second half and fourth quarter leads as they have. Like, do they start to figure, oh, here we go again? Like Dallas almost came back on us. Like last year, team after team came back on them, like, and it just, it shifted, it sucked the last bit of soul that they had about thinking about getting back into that game. And it was, you can't, as much as the Derrick Henry touchdown run was a kick in the teeth, like, that fumble was really where the game was over.
100%. And the Derrick Henry run was bad, and they got completely mauled. And I think they got straight up punched in the mouth. And I do think that's partially on the personnel. Like, I don't think anyone on that defense played a full on good game. I mean, it was just a mess. And I you could partially attribute that to Babich, but again, like, where I will give him grace is the fact that he has been dealing with such a banged up unit. And I 100% believe that if Teron Johnson, Matt Milano, and Terrell Bernard are playing in that game, it's a completely different outcome. But that's not the case. So you have to go in there with a game plan that can work. And it was a mix of, I think, Babich, but also a mix of them just dealing with the discrepancies. So I'm like in between on it, because like, I definitely understand that when you're dealing with that second level of guys, those second stringers, third stringers, that's just going to put you in a deficit. But also, like, it seemed like they just could not figure it out whatsoever. And I think that does have to go a little bit to coaching. So again, there's a mixed bag. But all in all, when we talk about September, just wrapping it up, I was pleased with Bobby Babich. I was pleased with how this D-line was performing, the timing of their blitzes, the way they were able to bring pressure in certain situations, the types of pressure they were bringing. I mean, talk about that Miami game and that one blitz with Jamarcus Ingram, and talk about like really just, it felt like he had a comfortable feeling of game script. And then I think this game kind of sours it a bit, but then he was also figuring it out, as you talked about with the Ravens, like kind of having that reputation of blowing leads. And it seemed like it was trending to that before all the momentum got sucked out of them. So listen, I look at this defense, I look at the rankings in the DVOA standpoint, they're still getting a lot of grace for it. They're 10th in defensive DVOA, 6th in passing DVOA, and 13th in rushing DVOA. And if you look at EPA, it's a little more brutal, but they still have a pretty solid passing defense. That game just felt like they met their match. You talked about matchups, Chris. They got punched in the mouth. And I think partial blame to Bobby Babich, which is why my overwhelming positivity that I mentioned at the beginning of this whole segment now drops down to, I feel good. I think it could have been better, but we move on. And there are factors definitely that contributed to this loss. And hopefully they don't rear their head anymore. So further thoughts
thing
on him.
Yeah, sorry. Same thing like the offense. Don't let this last most recent week ruin the whole month. I'm curious to see where maybe you're pulling EPA from, because sometimes EPA can be a little bit different, but at least according to Sumer Sports, the defense ranked 7th on EPA surrendered per play at -0.16. So, talking top 10, even after a game that was atrocious, and they are number 1 in EPA per pass attempt surrendered at -0.34 for the season. So there is still a lot of good on this defense, and that includes having to work through all of these injuries. I completely agree with you. Like, we probably needed faster adjustments from the defensive game plan than we saw in this game. Injuries are not an excuse, but they are a limiting factor. And, there were limitations on how they could adjust to, and which adjustments might have worked, based on who was able to be on the field. So I'm not going to give Babich a pass, because nobody gets a pass from that game. But I am going to understand, you were up a creek, dealing with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, and enough of a passing game to mess with a lot of inexperienced guys out on the field.
I think that's a good way of putting it. You can't really let yourself unravel. And I think that when you go to this Houston matchup too, like Houston is more of a passing offense. And I actually haven't seen anything on Joe Mixon, so I'm not sure if he's playing. If he's not, though, I definitely feel like you're going to have a much easier time limiting them as far as how multiple they can be with their rushing and passing. And therefore, I think that plays into the strengths of this Bills defense. Because one thing about Sean McDermott defenses in general is that they really haven't ever been a strong run defense unit. And part of that's by philosophy and design, because again, like in normal circumstances, when games aren't, covered in angel dust and going absolutely insane, you don't give up to almost 200 yards to Derrick Henry. You don't give up that many rushing yards. And that level of, I guess if you want to call it like poor rushing defense, just I can't think of any other way to put it, isn't really sustainable. Like they had a stretch, I think it was back in 2017, where they gave up like back-to-back 200-yard rushing games or something like that, or something close.
The November games with the Ravens and the Saints. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness gracious. That was brutal. And that has happened before, but I would be inclined to say, I don't think that this is the game this happens again. I'm knocking on wood. And you look at, again, a team that's passing more. I think that plays into the Bills' strengths. I think their passing defense wasn't really tested that much on Sunday because it didn't need to be. Because, again, it was such a dominant rushing performance that you kind of are selling out and still trying to figure it out. And all of a sudden, soft spots are exposed because maybe they're just like, I don't even know, man. It was all bad. It was all bad. And I just think with Houston, you could play a little bit more discipline in your pass defense. You don't have to worry about a Derrick Henry in the backfield or like a Lamar Jackson running. Granted, CJ Stroud, can move and he's got athleticism, but I think it's just the type of game you can have a bounce back performance in. It's still a tough ass matchup when you talk about, again, Diggs, Dell, Nico Collins. It feels so weird talking about Diggs leaving the team, but that's a game you just got to get yourself right in. And I think they can. And I think one bad game shouldn't define this defense, especially when you talk about the injuries they face. And thank you to Brandon here, who says Mixon is day to day. So it's likely he plays. And that does add a wrinkle because Mixon has been very good for them, both as a runner and as a pass catcher out of the backfield. it's a game you got to get right in. I think you can play a far more competitive showing this time. It's a matchup to matchup league. They matched up against a team that just had every advantage in the book when you talk about what the Bills were facing. And really, with Bobby Babich, I'm encouraged. Want to see more, same way with Joe Brady, but I think that they can get it done in the coming months. And I think that there's still a lot of talented personnel on this team too that can hold them over despite the injuries. So, Chris, any final thoughts on that before we just get a little more specific into one player with the news that we heard about today?
I guess we have to do it. Let's go ahead and we'll do it. Okay. All right.
Von Miller suspended for 4 games after an incident that occurred last year, I think in December. We were all kind of at the time wondering, when would the discipline happen? Would it be the same season? But I believe there was I think it was just mainly just because it was in Texas, and Texas, they have to go through the process. There's no way to kind of get out of it after it started. So there was time taken. And now you get to this season. I hadn't really heard much on it. And now there's a 4-game suspension for Von Miller, who was, yes, he was playing on true passing downs and he was generating a ton of pressure on those true passing downs. So you basically lose one of your most productive edge rushers for 4 games. But Chris, I mean, this defensive line this month and then going forward, I mean, obviously losing Miller is a blow, but what's your confidence level? How do you feel about them? And really, what do you expect when you see them going into this matchup?
Yeah, they just brought in is it Zion Logue, who is
from Georgia.
Not going to be a Von Miller replacement, but they're going to be looking to continue to add to this defensive line, and because there's no replacing Von Miller. Last year was bad. Last year he was still recovering from the ACL tear, but he was playing really well in his limited snaps this year. He had a pass rush productivity rate of 11.3. Now that's shorter. It's on fewer snaps, but that's his highest rate since 2015. And his 10.8 PRP led the league in 2016. Like, he was playing at an exceptional level. That 11.3 was his highest rate since, I think I said since 2015. And he was playing really well on a structured snap count, and the acceleration, the burst was there to accompany the pass rush knowledge that he's always had. And he was being really effective, albeit limited snaps. So thankfully there's not, it's not like we have to replace 75% of snaps for what he was doing, but it is going to be a significant challenge to replace the quality of the snaps that he was giving. Thankfully, Solomon is back. And actually, if you pull out, if you don't have any minimum snap requirements at PFF, Solomon actually leads the league in the pass rush productivity rate. So maybe we see him get some more snaps in Von's absence over these 4 weeks. I can't speak to the validity of the suspension. I don't know enough of the information. There was enough questionable stuff there that I'm not gonna fight against the suspension. What matters more to me is okay, how do we replace the production on the field during these 4 weeks? And is that going to mean Babich has to blitz at a higher rate? Does that mean does Javon Solomon play more? Do we see even more of Epinesa? Does that mean Groot probably ends up getting double teamed even more? There's a lot of ramifications to this suspension, and none of them are particularly good for the Bills. If we'd lost him last year, they probably would have been fine. Probably wouldn't have been much different. But this year he has been playing well, and it's going to be a loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, RJ says Von played 9 snaps last game. I know he was producing a bit, but he still isn't good enough to start over AJ Epinesa right now. Yes, he is. Yes, he is, RJ. He is absolutely good enough to start over AJ Epinesa right now. We will not agree on this, but he is absolutely good enough. And I like AJ. I think AJ's been productive. Von has literally had a stellar pass rushing season. He's been used on limited basis, absolutely, but there was a reason for that. You don't want to put too much on his plate at this age, after the injury he dealt with, but he's been having probably as productive, at least in a pass rush standpoint, a season that he was having before he got hurt in 2022. Like, he's looked like old Vaughn.
Mm-hmm.
He has. And it's not even just from like a production standpoint. Like, you look at how he actually looks on tape, and the bend is back, the explosiveness is back. Like, all these things are back in his game. I just don't agree that he wasn't good enough to start over AJ Epineza, as much as I like the fact that they were containing Vaughn for true pass rushing downs, just because, again, like, I think Vaughn is just such a good presence that as a pass rusher, I would rather have him knowing that you're putting someone in a deficit. They either have to get the ball out quickly and play into the second level a bit more, or just the fact that if you try any sort of long developing play with an offense, he's going to find the quarterback or get very close and hurry them up. Like, I think AJ Epineza is playing well. And I think AJ Epineza is helping them out, just again, from his length, the ability to clog passing lanes, the ability to kind of set the edge a bit. But I also think when you're talking about as a pass rusher, Von Miller is playing a better game right now. But I still like AJ. That is not a knock on AJ. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
No.
I just had to pull this up.
Yeah, Vaughn has a specific role. You know, he is not a 75% snap player anymore at, what is he, 35, 36, somewhere in that range.
Like 40s. I think I don't remember what the actual metric is. I got to look that up.
Oh, no, sorry, his age. I can't remember what his age is.
I was like, that sounds about right, but I think it might be a little.
But snap percentage, yeah. So I don't recall what his snap percentage is, but he is, he's a specialized role player on this team right now. Now, whether or not he could do the things as a run stopper from prior years, back when he was in Denver, because he was actually an excellent run defender. He's a Hall of Fame player, but he is also older. He is in a specialized role. Now, they're not asking him to be a starter. They're asking him to be Mariano Rivera and to close the game. And, he has been doing that, really, really well this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I love the Mariano comparison. You've thrown out some baseball references I've been a huge fan of when you talk about, like, don't abandon your best pitch on a home run. It is, yes. Playoff baseball starts for me in a couple of days. Hopefully it's the Kansas City Royals going to New York, because I would love to see Baltimore get swept. Are you an Orioles fan?
No, I'm Yankees.
You're Yankees. No, you are Yankees. Okay. So, I mean, especially after Sunday night against the Ravens, I'd love to see the Orioles get swept. You guys had it too good for too damn long. But no, and again, like, I think AJ he's younger, so you can put him in for more snaps and let him get more of a workload. But yeah, that comparison's perfect. Von's your closer, he's your clincher, and he's been doing a great job at it, and I love him in that role. And I think it is a loss, because even on true passing downs, even if the situation is obvious, like, I love what Rousseau's done, and I love Epineza, but, like, I loved having Vaughn as that additional piece and the flexibility you could offer with that, especially when you talk about just what you can show defenses and how you can mix things up. Because with Vaughn on the edge, maybe we move, like, I seen them move Epineza inside before Smoot came back, or maybe you have a set where Rousseau kicks inside, or maybe you do something where you show that look, and then all of a sudden one of these guys drops back. I actually think I saw who was it? I think it was Epineza's drop back into coverage a couple times because they sent a linebacker through a blitz. So, like, there's different ways to mix your pressure, and having a guy like Vaughn just makes you more multiple in that regard. Without him, I still like Greg, I still like AJ, but I do think that hampers you, especially when you talk about Terrell Bernard's not there, and he's a really good blitzing linebacker. Matt Milano's not there. He's a really good blitzing linebacker. Teron Johnson isn't there. He's good when you ask him to blitz. All these guys that are capable of doing it. And it's not to say that Cam Lewis can't. I'm getting more depressed as I talk.
Like, stop talking, Joe. Stop talking. I'm sighing audibly over here.
I'm making Chris sad. But, like, I like what Cam Lewis has done. I like what Dorian Williams has done in that regard, but you just get more when you have a guy like Von Miller on the field and the threat of him as a pass rusher. And to lose that for 4 games, especially in the matchup where you're talking about a team that's probably going to pass more than they run, that has a really promising young quarterback at CJ Stroud, and a team that likes mixing up its coverages and to make things more difficult for you post snap, and now not having that edge rusher that can generate the pressure in addition to that. That to me is a loss, and it sucks to lose him for 4 games. I understand why. I don't want to get too deeply into that factor as much as I understand why the league's doing it, and I understand why it took as long as it did, because, again, like, these things take time. But it's a loss for on the field, and you have to figure it out to replace it. And you brought up Solomon. I'm really excited about the kid. I am. I mean, I know it was garbage time against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm not trying to make this sound like this is a high leverage situation for when he came in. But when he came in, he jumped right off the screen, and he was matched up against the Jags starting tackle. Granted, all of you in our chat could probably go try out for starting tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now and have better success. However, it was still a starting tackle in the NFL for a rookie edge rusher that you wanted to see something from, and you saw something from him. He got right past him. He generated the strip. He had a sack. He looked really good in that limited role. Javon Solomon, to me, has an opportunity now on those true pass rushing sets, because I worry a little bit of him as a run defender. I don't know if they're ready to give him that role yet. But putting him in at the end, maybe on a 3rd and long, putting him in on a 3rd down situation where they're going to throw that ball and they don't have those easy rushing, that easy rushing lane or that ability. I think this is a test for the kid to show what he has and make some noise, show some flashes, speed things up for CJ Stroud, speed things up for the next few matchups, and let's see what he's got. Because if he can thrive in this role, that shows me 2 things. One, you have an embarrassment of riches at the edge rusher position, especially pass rushing on true passing downs. And 2, you have a future in that, because Vaughn won't be here forever. We don't know how much time he has left on the Buffalo Bills. Like, that sounded way more morbid when I said that first. I meant football. But I think you would absolutely give yourself more optimism on the edge rushing room, especially if they add to it in the draft, if you have a guy like Solomon thriving. So I take on the Von Miller situation. Chris, anything to add to that or the D-line in general before we hit our final topic?
I think it's time for Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones to step on up. We've seen the last couple of days some metrics come out suggesting, they haven't played as well as they did previously. And we've got guys like Stroud and Aaron Rodgers and Geno Smith coming up. Like, those are guys who you can really affect, not as mobile with that central pressure up the gut. Like, they're going to need, Ed and Daquan to step up and be those guys they were last year, especially over these next 4 weeks. Like, they are still, equally as talented guys. I think those metrics that I've seen are probably going to average back out in their favor as the season progresses. But with Vaughn out, we're going to need to see that defensive interior really step up.
Totally agree. And, I bring this comment up because I don't fully disagree that the interior D-line has been a bit disappointing, as much as I think there's more to it than just like Daquan's washed or Ed is overrated. Like, and I'm not saying that that's what Mass is suggesting, because as he says, the D-line in general, once again, has been a total disappointment so far. Dozens of high draft picks and millions spent on those players, and it's never a dominant group. Again, I think that's partially, I don't want to say by design. You obviously want a dominant D-line, but like, game plan dictates so much of that. And when you talk about the Buffalo Bills and what they have in the interior and how good it was last year, including Ed Oliver, and the fact that they still have a Von Miller that, like, again, before he got suspended, was playing at a high click, and teams are noticing that, there's also the desire to get the ball out of your hands faster, to get it out of harm's way faster. And you look at teams like Miami, who Tua usually has a pretty low time to throw. He's usually getting the ball out super quickly. One of the lowest in the league. Yeah, exactly. Especially because their O-line is hot garbage, and every defense finally figured out that if you just send pressure up the middle, Miami is going to crumble. And look at what's happening. You look at Arizona, and Arizona had a super mobile quarterback that's hard to bring down, and he evades pressure. You look at Jacksonville, that was struggling. They were 0-2 going into that game. They were trying to get the ball out quickly. When Trevor had to hold on to the ball, he was making mistakes, and they were generating pressure. Ed has also had some flash plays. Daquan Jones has made some plays in run D. I think the demise of the Bills' interior defensive line is being greatly exaggerated, but I also don't think it's unfounded. They do need to step up, and I'm glad you bring that up, Chris. This is a matchup where you want to see Ed and Daquan Jones really shine. If CJ Stroud has to hold the ball, I am very excited to see what they can do. But if they don't do anything, and we're talking about a pass rush that isn't hitting home, and Stroud's got all day to throw, I'm going to have big concerns going into the rest of the month, especially when you got to deal with eventually Aaron Rodgers. And I know Aaron Rodgers is 40, but like, give Aaron Rodgers time, he's still going to burn you. Yep. Geno Smith, who's been playing, Geno Smith is playing exceptional football right now. Yep. He looks phenomenal. Like, I am actually blown away by the whole career transformation of him, but like his pocket evasion, dude, that game against Detroit, he looked like Tom freaking Brady. I'm not even trying to exaggerate that. Like, he looked phenomenal. The accuracy is there. I'm gushing over Geno Smith and the words.
He's earned it. Yeah, he's earned it. He really has. It is one of the more dumbfounding comebacks, and resuscitations of a career that I can imagine. But like, forget everything you knew about Geno before and evaluate him based on his time as Seattle's starter, and he's excellent. Like, he's been great for them, and it's unquestionable. And it's also unquestionably like bizarro world. Like,
Yeah.
So hats off to him, for that tenacity over his career, to stick with it and to hone his craft behind the scenes. Yeah, but like he is one of those guys that, where he has good pocket awareness, good pocket mobility, you still can turn him off. Sorry, I'm in my garage and my garage door just opened.
And
Sorry
no one's
about
there.
that. No,
Is
my
there a
wife
figure?
just came home with groceries. This is a great live podcasting moment. So it's raining outside, and she's trying to bring the groceries in. So yeah, that's great. It's great.
That's fantastic.
But the real life intervenes and takes precedence.
This is a great metaphor for there being more to life than football.
There's absolutely more to life than football. Go out, touch some grass. Like, don't let the Baltimore game get you down.
Get your groceries.
Yeah, you still got to get groceries. You still got to have dinner.
Yeah, we're all just groceries in the bag of life, But I brought this up too because Sam Darnold is following the same career track as Geno. This is Geno's third year in his comeback, and this will be year one for Darnold. Yeah, Darnold's been awesome. I mean, I can't say enough about how good he's been. There's been clips shared. I think Eric was sharing them on Twitter about just like some of the throws he's making over the middle of the field are like ungodly, insanely accurate seam balls that like are perfectly placed. The throw to Jefferson against San Fran was unreal. Like that. Shout out to Kevin O'Connell, man. I have a lot of respect for him as a coach already. And what he's getting out of Darnold is crazy. Like, no one thought they had any chance of being at 4-0. And there's a lot of football to play, but I give so much credit to that group. But yeah, I guess just putting a bow on the conversation, we want to see more out of the defensive line. Absolutely. I think the interior has a lot of chance to be okay for the rest of the year. I feel differently. I've been pleased with them so far. I think the Baltimore game, again, as we alluded to, like, was just a mix of game script and not allowing them to really hit home and not really being in true pass rushing situations. And there was a time where, like, again, in the second half of that game, there was pressure hitting home. And sometimes by design, it's not an edge rusher that's supposed to get there, but rather the safety or the corner you send. So as long as they're doing their job, maintaining their lane, I'm okay with it. And I think that there's still going to be a lot of productivity from that group this year, but losing Vaughn definitely sucks. And I hope that doesn't really shake things up, because if it does, that's going to be a problem. This team needs pass rush and it needs pressure. But let's put a bow on this, Chris. Let's go to the worst part of this conversation, the worst part of this episode, the one that we spent so much time talking about before we started and went live, and that's the special teams. Yeah, 29th in DVOA. Yep. Tyler Bass has missed a couple kicks. They let up that return touchdown. And I said to Chris before the show went live, I wonder if the numbers are a little inflated just because of how often they are kicking and teams are taking the touchback because there's really no consequence. And like, I don't know, man. I really like, I will say this, Tyler Bass made a couple good kicks, but some of the misses have just been egregious. Some of the blocking has been bad. That first game was just a collapse. I mean, if there's a unit I'm truly pessimistic on, it's this. And I'm just wondering if Matthew Smiley can course correct, but I don't know if that's in the cards right now, because 29th is brutal. And just some of the showings have been brutal when they have happened. Brandon Codrington's a bright spot. That's a bright spot. Yep. And as Spin points out, Sam Martin, what a beast. What are you talking about special teams? He's actually been pretty good. I won't lie. He hasn't been. What was that?
Yeah. I'm actually like, I'm meh about the entire special teams unit. I'm like, I don't, just be average. Like, don't, be an offensive lineman. Like, don't stand out for the wrong reasons. Like, just be average. I don't need you to, make us the best field position team in the NFL. Like, just don't mess up, just don't stand out for the wrong reasons, and Bass has been okay. Like, I was hoping some of his confidence was coming back with that 50-yarder against Baltimore, and then the next kick happens, and so I don't know what we're getting there, but he's the kicker for better or worse. So, like, please, Tyler, just get better. But in terms of the rest of the special teams, like, Codrington has been the only thing that stood out for a positive reason. And, he's, I think he's like 12th or 13th in average punt return, and he had one great kickoff return, but they've just been bad on teams overall. Like you said, was 29th in DVOA, and just I don't need you to be number one. Just let's be 17th, and not be the redheaded stepchild, and just move on with our day so we don't have to talk about special teams.
It's a double-edged sword too, because I mean, like
Yeah.
I said to you, and like I just said before, like if that you can't do the if game, it happened, but like let's just say they don't let up that return touchdown. How different does it look, and how much of that weighs on what's been limited amounts of reps or limited amounts of snaps of special teams, because it's usually just a touchback. And like I do look at some of the factors, like the fact that there's a lot of new personnel and a lot of new people being coached under Smiley and having to kind of get that going, and new roles being assigned, and some of the people that have been staples of the special teams unit, like the Saran Neals or the Matakaviches, aren't here anymore. So you expect a transitional period, but 29th is still damning. And you talk about a team that we know they're in transition, but you still have playoff aspirations for. That's a problem. That's going to be a problem, especially if teams see that and want to test it, if they feel like getting out of their comfort zone of the touchback and trying to exploit, whatever mismatch, whatever new body, whatever issue it may be. And then just ultimately, I wrap it up with Tyler Bass, because it's concerning, and it really sucks, because I honestly thought the extension was totally justified when it happened. 2022, he made numerous clutch kicks for the team. Obviously, there were some misses mixed in there, but they weren't as glaring, because he would hit like a 53-yarder to win the game. He had one clutch kick against Baltimore that won them the game, the clutch kick against Detroit, which I think was like a 48-yarder or something along those lines. Numerous times during that year where he came through and you were counting on him. Bass money was a real thing. You give him his money. He deserved it. It's just he hasn't lived up to the contract. It's been disappointing. I think, a lot of evaluation on this is kind of like an overarching thing, but like Brandon Beane and the contracts he gives out. Brandon Beane likes getting contracts in early for the best value possible, but the risk that does come with that is when it bites you. And you can talk about Dawson Knox's contract as another example. Like, you pay a decent chunk, but you're also not paying number one in the position, but you're also hoping that they return on investment. So like Spencer Brown, for example, granted, he didn't have the best game against Baltimore, had been returning on that investment for 3 games. You were hoping you'd get that with Tyler Bass, and you just simply haven't. It's been kind of a regression mentally. I don't really know what the lapses are. I know there's been a lot of pointing at Sam Martin, but really, you still got to make these kicks, man. You still got to do it. There's been plenty of good kickers in this league that have had other punters that have helped, that have held, and they've been able to still be productive. So it's got to get better. It just has to get better. Some of those misses are just inexcusable. And again, like some of them have been, or I think that one against Jacksonville got blocked. I can excuse it, but still, like it's got to be better in those times where there's no pressure and you're just missing and whiffing, like in that Baltimore game. So I'm not encouraged. I'm not. And I hate leaving it on a sour note, but special teams has been a general problem. There's some bright spots. I hope they can build around it and improve as a unit as the season goes on. But if they get tested, I'm very concerned. And I just hope it can get better as the year goes on. And Chris, any final thoughts on this?
Yeah. So like this is special teams is the one area where I don't have much hope. Like I haven't seen much from Matthew Smiley to really feel like, oh, okay, like he's going to get this straightened out. He's going to make this better. Like I just if you can get to a point of consistency, like just professional competence, like I don't need you to be number one in anything. Just like stop standing out for the wrong reasons. Like, okay, Tyler Bass, like, okay, you want to struggle with kicks over 50 yards. Okay. A lot of kickers handle that like it's nothing anymore, but that's a really long kick. Like, okay, we don't need to expect 56, 57 yarders from you, but like we have to have you as a reliable option for everything inside of 50 yards. Like that's a reasonable expectation for a kicker in the modern NFL. Like totally it shouldn't feel like a gamble. A 45-yard field goal, like you can't expect 100% accuracy at that, but like it shouldn't feel like a gamble. And right now, when he lines up to kick, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. You really don't. And I actually do like this comment from Walter. I don't think this is what you implied, Chris, but a good point too. Just in general discourse, like
Yeah,
Smiley
yeah.
has his deficiencies, but
Yeah.
we're not. It's not bad. It's not Smiley's fault that Bass has just regressed. Like
No,
kicking,
no, no.
kick,
No.
yips are like it sounds so general, but yips are a thing too. Like mental
Yeah.
regression when it comes to that position where there's such a thin margin for error is incredibly real. And I think that's just what Tyler Bass is going through, and you hope he can work his way out of it. And I honestly was kind of encouraged at the start of the year because he was making some consistent kicks, and I was like, it was like one miss sprinkled in with like 5 makes, and you're kind of like, all right, like I'll live with this. But it looks like he's starting to get his mojo back. But again, like the Baltimore game, that one should have been made. It just simply should have been made. And it's just like that kind of thing worries me because what's going to happen when it's 20-20? You're talking about ending the game with a walk-off field goal and you have a 51-yarder and we're asking you to make it. And also, how much more pressure? And I forgot who made this point. Someone brought this up. It's a brilliant point. I can't remember if it was someone in our space or something I've seen on Twitter or whatever. But how much more pressure does this put on Sean McDermott to maybe decide to go for it if it's like a 54-yard try or a 53-yard try? How much more does it matter if they're in like a 4th and 3 and they have the option to kick? Do they try to go for on 4th down more often, which is, I know, ironic because people are mad at McDermott for the 4th down decision in Baltimore, but does that put more of an emphasis on 4th down conversions? Does this put more pressure on Josh Allen on 4th down? Does this put more pressure in general? That's something I'm curious to see as well. And if Bass doesn't give you any reason to think he's going to right the ship, then I think that just has to happen because this is who you got. Like, this is who you got. You could get someone off the practice or like off the street, someone you could bring to the practice squad, someone you could sign and bring up. But like, I don't think that's going to happen because I just don't think the options are as viable. Like Bass is still your guy. It's not like it's only going to get better from a guy off the street. These guys had worse metrics, I think, last season based on some of the ones I've seen. Like, it's just, this is who you got and you have to work around it. And working around it might be we have to literally go for it all the time until we get to a range we feel comfortable. And even then, 49, 48, even 45, I'm still kind of like, I don't know. Like, I just don't feel good about it right now. And I just really want to see improvement, but I'm not holding my breath, unfortunately. As optimistic as I can be, unfortunately, even if it's pessimistic, it's just the unit hasn't given you a reason to buy into it. So,
I think if we got, I think our reasons for hope lie in the defense has been really good despite the injuries. The offense has been outstanding and, has some kinks to continue working out, but like the floor for that offense is Josh Allen, and that should give us as much reason to hope as anything else. And, if they can be professionally competent players on special teams, which I think they all can be, so I think there's reason to be, reasonably minimally hopeful for a level of competence on special teams and for that to be okay because we're outstanding in the other 2 units.
Yeah. And wrapping it up and just final thoughts on September as a whole. Like, you tell me before the season starts in a September that has Miami, Jacksonville, because let's not use hindsight. Before the year started, everybody thought that first 4-game stretch was going to be tough. Jacksonville, I know that they missed the playoffs, but you still had all those weapons. They draft BTJ. They won the past 2 matchups, and you look at it like, man, that's a classic Bills trap game. And then Miami, yes, you beat them every time. It's still a divisional matchup early in the year. That first 4-game stretch, even Arizona, I thought was going to pose a tough matchup, and they actually did. I was sitting here saying if you could get out of there like 2-2, I'd be okay. 3-1, I'd be ecstatic. They're 3-1. They're 3-1 with an opportunity to literally end October, even if they go 1-3, still at a 4-2 tick where the schedule doesn't lighten up a ton, but lightens up a little bit if you look at the way some of these teams are trending. And I actually think they could probably, take Seattle pretty well. I think Indy is a team they can beat. Tennessee's a team they can beat. I mean, nothing's a gimme in this league, but when you talk about matchups, I feel pretty good about that. Like, get me to right now, like a 4-2, 5-1 click. 5-1, I'd be over the moon, but 4-2 click, and I'm perfectly comfortable because I want to stress, and I tweeted this, in 2020, this Buffalo Bills team was 4-2, and there was a lot of concern after that Tennessee game where they got blown out. But external factors led to that being kind of what it looked like. And, external factors led to why the Bills got, trounced in Baltimore because, like it or not, they were missing key pieces, and that's just an unfortunate reality of the NFL, and those things can happen. But a lot of season left to play. I know September ended on a sour note, but they're 3-1 with an opportunity that even getting one win in October still puts them in a great position, not only for the division, but for the AFC conference as well. And for that, I'll remain optimistic despite the pessimism that lies in special teams and some of the factors after this Ravens game. But, 1 week, we're looking at everything in a negative lens because they just got blown out. If they beat Houston, the flowers will bloom, the rainbows will show in the sky, the sun will shine again. So, Chris, any final thoughts?
Yeah, the best thing about September is that football's back. The Bills are 3-1, and football came back in September. Like, that makes September a great month. No matter how it ended, football is back. The Bills have one of the best teams in the league. Silenced a lot of the doubts that were out there, even despite the Baltimore game. That offense has silenced a lot of the doubts that were out there about all of those changes. And most important thing about September is football's back.
Football's back. Your team is 3-1. And like, for all the talk about this team in transition, which I still very much believe they are, they're playing above their means. And like I have said numerous times, I don't even think this is the best iteration of the Buffalo Bills you're going to see over the next 5 years. Reinforcements will be on the way eventually, but for right now, I still think this team's quite competitive. I still think they can be a playoff team. I still think they could go on a run. If this is the absolute floor of what we're going to watch for this Bills team for the next few years, it could still be a good thing. So we'll just have to wait and see, but you're absolutely right. Football's back. September is a great month no matter what. And I just have to pull up this comment, RJ. This is Matt Smiley is a war criminal, ... That is separate from Bass being shot. I'm not disagreeing with you, RJ, in the terms of Matt Smiley is not great at so far, given the results. I just think war criminal is such a funny term when we talk about sports, but he isn't helping. My issue with Smiley is that he has captained the worst ST unit in the league last year and now this year. And that I agree with. I thought maybe the change in the rule might have given him grace, might have given him okay, let's see what he can do, but it just still hasn't been going well. And unless it improves, I don't think personally the tenure lasts. And also, this is a great comment from Monkey Business. Imagine the confidence Josh Allen would have if he knew all he had to do was get to midfield every possession. This is in reference to Kansas City with Harrison Butker. That's a great point too. If you had a guy like a Butker or a Brandon Aubrey, who someone brought up on the bottom, oh my God, paired with Josh Allen, you'd feel amazing about having a drive in at midfield. That Ravens game, you're probably getting 9 more points on the board just in field goals alone. It's such a luxury to have a great kicker. And when you deal with the lapses that Bass is providing you, it reminds you of how important it is in the modern NFL, as it was pointed out. So listen, Chris, this was an awesome discussion. I'm always happy to have you here, but very much appreciate you joining me tonight. What you got going on, man? Where can people find you? What are you working on?
Yep, you can continue to find me at LowBuffa on Twitter. That's really my only social media. The Film Room, get to work with Eric and Anthony as the producer with those guys, and they are both brilliant at football, and that airs on Wednesdays, usually at 5. And then also happy to produce the Greg Tomset football show. Greg's got a little bit of an unpredictable schedule, but you can usually count on his weekly recap on Sunday Night Football at halftime so that you do not have to listen to Jason Garrett and feel like a sane human being by avoiding that junk. And then also been really excited this year to have the chance to write for Bills on Sports Illustrated. So check out that handle, give them a follow, watch for all the work by the really talented guys and me too that are coming out with the chance to write for Sports Illustrated over there. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Joe. This has been great. Despite the fact that my garage door opened in my groceries, so just a little behind the scenes. This isn't really a library that I'm sitting in, but yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me on. And go Bills.
Always appreciate you being here, man. And yeah, guys, check out the work he's doing, especially the Sports Illustrated articles. I mean, that is such a cool thing that we gotten to do with them, like our group, our network, and the writers we have from our network that are writing for them are just exceptional. It's such insightful work. You're going to learn a ton from any article that any of the guys on our staff do, but especially Chris. I've gotten a chance to read many of them, and it's wonderful work and just something that is just another enriching piece of this, the content space that I think people could definitely benefit from. And by the way, that wasn't a garage door, guys. What he actually is, he's in his secret library, and that was the secret door to his spy lab that opened up and it malfunctioned because Chris doesn't want you to know he's actually a double agent. So I had to blow your cover.
That was the Batcave.
That was the Batcave. And as RJ wraps us up with, yep, the war criminal moniker was transferred from Ken to Simon Dorsey to Matt Smiley when Dorsey was fired. See, your disdain for Ken Dorsey is so bad that you actually did full name, like middle name, but you haven't done it for Matt Smiley. So I can't really tell if you actually hate Matt Smiley. I don't know if your hatred is strong enough, RJ. I expected more out of you. Where is his middle name, huh? And finally, I think this is a lost year, but a lost year with Josh is still 10 wins. I have hope for 2025 and beyond, though. We just have to draft perfectly the next couple of years. Again, I don't think this is the best version of the Bills you'll see, but this I like that sentiment. I still think 10, 11 wins is perfectly realistic, and I think they can get there with strong Septembers like this and hopefully a strong rest of the season. But Chris, again, thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate your time, guys. Check out the work he's making. For me, my name is Joe DeRosa, and you can find me at Twitter/X at show_DeRosa. I host this show every week, 7:30 p.m. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to drop a like on your way out, but don't close your YouTube app or your Facebook app or wherever you stream, because in just 10 short minutes, Anthony Prohaska is going live with his guest. Damn it, I hate when I stutter on the outro. With his guest, JP Acosta, as the two of them are going to be going over this Bills-Texans matchup in depth. So if you liked our conversation and want more Bills topics, more matchup conversation, more X's and O's, that is the show to watch. They will be on very shortly, so hang around for that. But for us, we are out for the evening. I appreciate every one of you for joining, for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. I hope the Bills keep that momentum from September going, good momentum, going into the rest of the season. But take care, and as always, go Bills. We'll see you soon.